Yeah.
All right, people are jumping on here and we're gonna wait for a couple minutes and let people in. And I have everyone on mute, so please do stay on mute as you're jumping on. I know some of you guys submitted questions and I'll address them, and feel free to use the chat to ask your questions and we will address them accordingly. And you guys are welcome to say hello, who you're with. This is Kendra Wise. Say hello to Kendra. Please be nice to her. Just kidding. You guys are nice people, I know it. So jump on the chat. If you guys are on here, say hello. We'll just wait a couple minutes as we're getting some more people coming on. It's just now 10:01. And I'm gonna get my ducks in a row while everyone's on here so we can get the questions lined up. Kendra, do you wanna introduce yourself real quick to everyone? I know Kendra Wise, I'll say that. And then you can kind of tell everyone. I know you and I talked, I want to say about a month ago towards the beginning of this, and you were very insightful, and I thought it was a great opportunity to have you come on now that we're a month later, 6 weeks after we've spoken.
Yeah.
And kind of still at a standstill, but why don't you say hello to everyone and then we'll get started. How's that?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kendra Wise, and I work with Santa Barbara County Public Health Department. In my normal job, I supervise our food and restaurant inspectors, as well as a couple other program areas. But for the last, feels like a lot longer than 10 weeks, but I think 10 weeks is what it's at. I've also been assigned to our county's COVID emergency pandemic response unit, the group of people who's helping coordinate public health department's response to COVID. So as part of that, myself and a couple of my colleagues in our division have done a lot of work with the community. So I'm one of the people when people have questions about whether or not their business can open and what's allowed or not allowed under state and local ordinances, I'm part of the team who helps answers those questions. And it's in that capacity that I'm with you today. So I'm looking really forward to talking with you about what we know and what we don't know about the types of things that event planners need to know for, events that you're hopefully going to be planning in the next few months. So that's
I know. Yep. Thank you. Thanks for being here. I know we were one of the biggest hit. I mean, everyone's economy, pocketbook, everyone's been hit. And hopefully what I want to get out of today, and everyone should bear with us because it's not you who has all the information. And I think we'll just keep talking about that, but really shed some light. Obviously, we all know where we've been, but we don't know where we're going, what we can do. There's some uncertainty. There's some discrepancies, whether it's from county to county, and we'll talk specifically about Santa Barbara County. I know some people on here do San Luis Obispo, so I have the contact information you gave me yesterday in case people have questions about SLO and what to expect. I know you don't have a crystal ball, and again, everyone needs to understand that you're filtering information for us as you get it, and it's not 100%. We're not going to have full clarity today, but hopefully a little bit of answers. And let's start with Kendra. You and I were talking about just before this call, before people jumped on, is I actually watched, and I don't know if anyone who's on here today has seen that Governor Newsom actually had his address yesterday, I believe it was. And specifically, it was towards, I think it was an hour long, and towards minute 43 or so, he talked about the concern specifically with families getting together and this being spread within family groupings that are getting together. I know for me personally, on Thursday, I got word I have family in Texas, and people had a family reunion. And sadly, a couple of my nearest and dearest got affected by this, and this was just a backyard barbecue. So weddings, family comes together. And why don't you tell us just a little bit about what you know about weddings, and then we can get to the meat of the questions and address some of those.
Yeah. So weddings specifically are addressed in our current health officer's order. And I can actually put this on the chat. We actually have a website. So I'm going to try and talk and fiddle with my Zoom controls at the same time. So apologize if I look, if it's an imperfect process. Right now, our health officer order does allow wedding ceremonies to occur. And those ceremonies are can be for either religious or non-religious weddings. We realize that not all weddings have a religious underpinning or a religious tradition that is part of them. Not everybody is engaged in those types of activities. So the order doesn't matter if it's a religious ceremony or not. The health officer's order is specific about wedding ceremonies. And it basically gives the guidance, says, regardless of whether or not your wedding ceremony is religious in nature, you need to follow the guidance for that the state has provided for worship ceremonies. So worship, or it's like cultural celebrations, I think is what the state guidance specifically says. And in a nutshell, that basically says that if you're at an indoor venue, you cannot have more than 25% of the capacity of the venue, and you must be able to maintain at least 6 feet of social distancing between people from separate households. If you're at an outdoor event, and you cannot exceed 100 people, regardless of the size of the indoor venue. So even if the indoor venue could hold 600 people, 25% of that would be 150, but you can't have more than 100 inside, regardless of the size of the venue. I don't know that we have that many extremely large venues in Santa Barbara County. Maybe a couple of the hotel ballrooms could handle that, but it's not super common. Now, outdoor venues, there's no limit on the total, there's no cap to the total number of people that can be at an outdoor venue, but everybody who is not from the same household is expected to keep at least 6 feet of social distancing between themselves. So the number of people that can be accommodated in an outdoor venue for a ceremony really is going to depend on if you can keep people from separate households at least 6 feet apart. So like people who live in the same household could sit together, but there would need to be 6 feet between them and people who live in separate households. That is just for the ceremony. At this time, there's no receptions allowed. So it's like ceremony and done is the expectation in the health officer's order. There's no cake, there's no champagne, there's no toast, there's no dancing. It is literally, we have a ceremony, that's the wedding, and then we are done. And that's the current health officer's order. Okay, this of course is changing. We were able to do none of the above for a while, right? And then now we're kind of moving into more is available, but it isn't the full wedding experience that a lot of your customers are probably hoping for. Mm-hmm. And so that's something to keep in mind, is it's really important that there's no reception.
Great. And so just to clarify, this is ceremonies indoors or out, whether it's in a church or I don't know,
out at a park or a private estate. It's not based on location. You're correct. It is, are you having a wedding? If so, these are the guidance. This is the health officer's order requirements. It is legally enforceable. So the orders are legally enforceable, and at the top of the order, and I'll send the link. It is clear that, a violation of the order is considered a misdemeanor. And so that's something to keep in mind, that, that's an issue. Now, one of the questions I see is who's enforcing this and who's monitoring it? And I think this is an interesting question. And I think the answer is there's two answers. The first answer is the official, like my official answer, right? As a regulator, because I normally work with inspections of restaurants and food facilities and swimming pools and body art facilities. The answer is that if you ask me who's in charge of food safety at a restaurant, my answer is the restaurateur, right? They're the restaurant owner and staff are the ones who are responsible for making sure that they meet the standards of the law. Same thing for somebody who's a tattooist, same thing for, you would say, a hotel operation, who's responsible for making sure that the law is followed, that the hotel is following the law. Well, the hotel is, right? Whoever's running the business, whoever's running the event. Do we have extra sets of eyes to help ask these questions and provide support and encouragement? The answer is also yes. That's what my job is in my day job. When it comes to the health officer's order, there's the different sectors of the economy are being assisted by different enforcement agencies. So environmental health, our team works with restaurants, caterers, body art facilities, because we normally regulate them. The sheriff's department is handling some types of facilities, depending on where they're located in the county. Sometimes it's a city code enforcement officer, sometimes it's a local police department. The cities might have also had some sort of administrative conversations as well. So enforcement's happening across the county. We're trying to do two things. We're trying to do outreach, so that everybody understands what the expectation is and what they can and cannot do, so that they can take full responsibility for the activities they're involved in and make sure they comply. We our experience has been that given the opportunity, people tend to want to comply, and that when it's very clear what the expectations are, folks can make good choices. If we receive complaints or there are problems, then we can move on into an enforcement process. It just depends on where you are, who's going to be enforcing. So that's kind of how that question goes. But I think the other thing I want to point out, and I think the thing that I think we all know, but it's nice to hear, is that we're in charge of making this. When I say we, I mean all of us, right? Like, who's in charge of making sure people wear their face covers when they're out? Well, the people who are out need to wear their face covers, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're seeing a rapid increase in cases. We are responsible for making sure that we are doing what needs to be done to help keep our communities safe. And that's going to be making choices about what we do. So while we do have like an official enforcement structure that exists, I think the heart of this is that the people who are responsible for monitoring and enforcing this are really the people who are engaged in these activities, that we have to be responsible for ourselves and our communities and follow these guidelines so that we can stay safe.
Great. So just to recap for a couple people that came in a little later, wedding ceremonies up to 100 people anywhere, ceremony done, period. No more than 100. Households 6 feet apart, distancing between households. That is what's allowed. And violating this is a misdemeanor. We should all be enforcing it. We should all be on the same boat so we can all open. And what happens if someone violates it?
So I'm going to go back just a sec, Zoe, just to provide additional clarification. Capacity for an indoor ceremony is no more than 100, but it's 25% of the indoor capacity or 100, whichever is, I think it's smaller, right? Yeah. So if you're in an indoor facility that normally only has a capacity of 100, your max is 25 people. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then outdoors, there's not a limit on how many people can be at an outdoor ceremony. Can they be properly physically separated by the 6 feet of social distancing? And then who's enforcing? Yeah, so the health officer's orders are locally enforceable. They are considered, a violation is considered a misdemeanor. What happens if you break the rule? Well, I mean, ultimately, so what's the worst that can happen? Well, it's a illness that kills some people, and if people get sick, then you could have people get sick, and that's what we're trying to avoid, right? So like when it comes down to it, what are we trying to avoid? We're trying to avoid people getting sick at gatherings. And so really that's sort of as a public health specialist, like that's my ultimate intent, is I want my community to be healthy and safe. And so when we break the health officer's order, we run a heightened risk of people being, it being unsafe and people having a higher risk of disease transmission. Let's be clear, nothing is risk-free, right? Going out of our homes carries risk with it. I'm at work right now, that carries risk with it. So I'm not saying that there's a way to, that any of us live in a bubble, but I do think it makes sense to know that when we do come together for things like wedding celebrations, or we go to the grocery store, or we are going to work, that we are taking on an increased level of risk. And so we need to do everything in our power to help keep that risk as manageable as possible for the folks that we're helping and serving. Because these are supposed to be joyous, meaningful, emotional celebrations of a family and an individual and a commitment, right? I'm talking specifically about weddings, but lots of events fall into that. And we want to help protect those memories in the future. Like not just we want to protect people in the event, that's our most important thing, but we also want to protect the memories. And to be honest, the memories are going to be different. People who are getting married during a pandemic are going to have different experiences than people who got married before or after the pandemic. And I think that's one of the things that's probably hard for you to have conversations about. I was trying to think, like, how would I have a conversation with somebody who had this wedding planned for like a year and a half and now is dealing with this? Like, what do you do? And that's going to be a really hard conversation. And I know that a lot of you are spending a lot of time having those conversations right now. And I think one of the things you can do is that the focus needs to be on their community at this time. And their community includes, is their friends and family as well. And that's hard, I know.
And I think one of the challenges that I've heard from, the wedding planners, the caterers, we have venues on here, we have photographers on here, we have officiants, like literally everyone is here. So thank you guys for being here.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks.
Is one of the biggest challenges is there seems to be, you have the couples that are like, oh, we're going to fly it under the radar. We can do it. I've gotten inquiries. I know a few people on here have gotten inquiries. Some people are doing weddings in people's backyards. And it's really the the couples, right, that really want to do this and communicating with them in writing, what is the best place? So I know you put the health officer's order here. Is this something that's updated on the regular, or
Oh,
where
yeah.
can we go so that we literally have black and white for our clients? This is the mandate. This is the ordinance.
Yeah. So there's two places you can go. So first of all, the health officer's orders are updated almost simultaneously with their announcement. So when we have a new health officer's order and it has any guidance about what can open, what can't open, what regulations you have to follow, that is automatically updated on the website that I just posted, which is, so I posted you a link to our specific most current health officer's order, but those are changing regularly. So the second link is the health officer's order website, which is on our county health department website as well. And that's where you can also see like a history, and you can see all the orders. There's a lot on there because not all orders pertain to businesses reopening. Some are about licensed care facilities and masking. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So, but the ones that are most common, the most recent, are at the top. So that's a quick reference. You can always go look, and you're going to be looking for things about phased reopening or businesses allowed to reopen. That's really where you're going to be looking. The second thing is that if you are operating a business right now in Santa Barbara County and you would like to, and you're supposed to have completed the county's attestation that you're reopened safely. Some of you are nodding, looks like you're familiar with that, and some of you may not be. So the County of Santa Barbara has said that if you're operating a business in Santa Barbara County at this time, you need to complete an attestation that says you've read the guidance for your industry and you've made a business plan that will help protect your workers, employees, and the people you do business with against the transmission of COVID, and that you have, there's like a checklist, there's a template, and then they ask you to attest that you will follow those. And that attestation is required in order to operate under our health officer's order. So the health officer's order says, if you're one of these business categories, you can operate, but you have to do the attestation. And then the attestation says, I'm promising that I have done these things and will continue to do them. And so I'm also going to post a link to the attestation or to that website. It's the Reopen Your Business website on the recoverysbc.org page. And that can be really helpful. You would, when you're looking at ceremonies for weddings specifically, sorry.
Sorry.
I'm trying to type and talk, and I'd like my brain just stopped, right? So if you're interested in reopening weddings, the guidance that we've received and the guidance in our health officer's order is that you're going to use the guidance for the worship and faith-based services and cultural ceremonies, that's the guidance you'll use and for wedding ceremonies specifically. Currently, there's no guidance for events. And there's no guidance for conferences or meetings or receptions or anything like that, because events are not yet allowed to occur in the state of California. And so if you're looking for event guidance, it doesn't exist. And that's because that industry sector isn't able to reopen. In terms of weddings, it's just ceremonies in Santa Barbara at this time.
Great. So what I'm understanding is we have the county attestation. I've seen it. I know like restaurants and probably some caterers that are on here that have pivoted their business to do cater outs versus, or,
takeout.
delivery.
Yeah, they do takeout or delivery right now.
I've filled it out. But as a planner, let's say I can only really do the attestation right now for wedding ceremonies up to 100 people or 25% indoor,
right,
6 feet apart. Everything we just talked about.
You could have more than 100 people if you have an outdoor venue that will allow you to properly socially distance more than 100 people.
Great.
For the ceremony only. Now, keep in mind that those of you who are caterers and things is that you probably won't be involved very much in these because there's no receptions allowed, right? So you can't have caterers aren't actually supposed to be catering events because events aren't supposed to be happening right now. And so it's really just the ceremony that we're talking about right now that's allowed.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I talked to, on Thursday, I was on the phone with wedding professionals internationally, and it was mostly people in the United States. And someone had talked about how they'd done an event in a state that really wasn't reopened to do an event. COVID came back literally to bite them in the butt because it was traced back to the event, right? So that's really, obviously what you said is, we all need to make sure that we're taking care of this. Obviously, you can get a misdemeanor violation if you're caught, but really worst case scenario, unless someone gets super sick, is that you would get involved as someone says, hey, yeah, I got COVID, and it gets traced back to an event.
Right. Right. And I think that's something that's worth talking about is even so the people in the community have COVID, right? That's like why we're having these conversations, right? It's out there. And not everybody shows symptoms, or not everybody has symptoms when they're infectious. So we know that people can be asymptomatic for up to 48 hours before they become symptomatic, but they can still be infectious. So you might have somebody who later shows up and has symptoms, but was asymptomatic in like 48-hour period. And then there's also folks who don't have any symptoms at all, even though they test positive. They're less common, but they're out there, which is part of the reason why we're asking everybody to wear face covers, right? Because face covers help protect, they don't protect you by wearing them, they protect the people around you in case you're asymptomatic and you don't know that you have COVID. And so it helps reduce the transmission of the disease from you to other people. It's less about protecting you from them. It's more about protecting them from you. And so one of the things to keep in mind is that you also should probably be thinking about, and this is something you're supposed to do as part of your attestation, what do you do if somebody calls you 2 or 3 days after an event and says, I just developed symptoms of COVID and have been tested positive, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's something that as a business operator, you might need to talk about. Okay, well, is that person taken care of? Are they isolating? Are there close contacts quarantining? What is a contact, right? Right now we're saying a contact is somebody who was within 6 feet of an infected individual for more than 15 minutes for at least any time in the 48 hours before they started symptoms or had a positive test onward. So, but also you're going to be these are weddings, right? Okay, imagine the emotional. Imagine, it's easy to imagine that people with the best of intentions could come to a wedding if they had a cold or a sniffle or a slight stomach ache or a slight headache or a slight fever because they didn't want to miss a wedding, right? And so, and they might think it's just a cold, it's allergies, I've got a little, I can totally believe that well-meaning, kind, thoughtful people might be able to talk themselves into coming to an event when they're feeling just a little bit off because they didn't want to miss a major life event for what might not be a big deal, and instead actually have it be COVID. And so I think those are things to think about as well, is how do we have this communication with the guests? Mm-hmm. How do we make sure that people who are coming don't have symptoms? What do we do when somebody gives us a call, not if, but when somebody gives us a call and says, I'm so sorry, I was at your event, I developed symptoms 2 days later. Mm-hmm. Those are the types of things that actually are discussed in the guidance that the state provides, and that should be covered in your business plan and checklist. So great. I see a bunch of questions. Well, is it okay if I just jump? Well, go ahead, Zoe.
Sorry, I was going to say, let's get to the questions of people who submitted ahead of time first and kind of go priority that way.
Yeah.
One of the questions was, what is the criteria utilized to determine gathering sizes and hurdles that need to be met to increase sizes?
Right. So that's a great question. And I can tell you that decision is being made at the state level, mm-hmm. as far as I'm aware. So we are taking our guidance from the state in that. And at this time, I'm not aware of a deviation from that. So I don't have any real insight into that process because I haven't been involved with the process at the state level.
Great. Yeah. And I think that's what we'll keep hearing. So, those of you that are on here, it really comes from Governor Newsom. And again, for those of you that maybe jumped on a little bit later, his number one concern during his press conference yesterday was literally family gatherings, people getting together, hugging, kissing, specifically what weddings are all about.
Totally, right?
I know the same questions keep coming up in different forms, but it comes from the government. Nothing's allowed right now.
Yeah, and Governor Newsom, but the California Department of Public Health is ultimately kind of the agency that's helping sort of collect the expertise and deliver it to the state. So that's, they're working together.
So the next question, and I think we've heard it a couple times, and I know the answer is, when do we think that events of 75 to 100 or less can happen? What do they think of fall events starting in September? And that came up a couple times for fall weddings.
Yeah. So the answer right now is I can only tell you what's right in front of us. I'm not even really able to predict Friday, got to tell you. Okay, so it's changing really rapidly. What I would say is right now, ceremonies only of up to 100 people inside a building, depending on the venue size, and more people than that if necessary outside of a building are currently allowed. But what will look like in the fall, what it looks like next Thursday, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm not hearing, I think one of the challenges is that because the pandemic changes rapidly depending on people's behaviors, and we have a 2 to 3 week lag based on behavior patterns, right? It's difficult for us to make those predictions. And I know this is really hard for all of you because your entire business model is designed on planning stuff in the future, right? And right now, what I'm telling you is we can't help you make firm plans for the future because we don't know how the pandemic will evolve over that time frame. I can tell you that it's highly, I'm crossing my fingers here and I'm hoping I won't be wrong. It's highly likely that plans that you're making for 2023, 2024, 2020, maybe 2021 or 2022 are probably okay, right? May not be this pandemic, right? But we don't know what's going to be happening in the next year, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And again, this kind of similar questions. Will we go into progressive increase of gatherings? We don't know, 10, 20, 50, then 100.
We don't know.
What about
Yep.
dancing?
We don't know. Dancing is probably not going to happen for a while, is my guess. If you think about the way that this pathogen, that this particular disease spreads, it's mostly person-to-person contact. And when you are perspiring or working out harder, you push particles out of your lungs more rapidly, right? Because you're doing stuff. And in dancing, you have crowded people all together, all working out, really kind of like exercising together, right? I mean, maybe a couple of you are like stand-in sway dancers, but like I've been to plenty of weddings. There's some serious aerobic activity that happens on those dance floors. And so I think dancing is going to be one of the things that we'll probably see quite a bit later, but that's just a guess on my part. There's some concerns about that.
I've been having a lot of dance parties for one in my living room.
Right.
My dog, actually. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone had a great question. Are N95 or K9 and KN95 masks available locally and for what price?
So the answer is I have seen KN95s at like a hardware store, but I don't know what the prices are per se. I think it's going to depend on lots of things. They're hard to come by, as you all know, and I don't know. I guess the thing I would point out is they're not required right now. What's required is a face cover. So, a face cover, I have my little cloth face cover here because I'm at work. I wear this. I'm in my own room right now, but I have a face cover. That's what's required. N95s are considered personal protective equipment. They have a higher seal. They have a higher likelihood of helping keep you as well as other people safe. Keep in mind that any masks with a valve on them that allow a preferential pathway for air to escape do not meet the face cover standard. A lot of N95s actually do have a valve because if you're like doing a lot of like sanding or work, it can get really hot and stuffy under the mask, and that helps vent the air. But that's exactly what we don't want. We don't want air vented out because the whole point of the N95 or the mask order is for other people to be protected from your breathing. So when you have a little valve that lets the air out directly to other people, that doesn't protect them, right? We want to kind of diffuse the exhalation. So what I would say is if people really, really want N95s and they can find them, okay, but what we really need are face covers. I mean, that's kind of the focus. The other thing too to keep in mind is that in order for an N95, for those of you people who are like, no, I need to be protected, I need an N95, keep in mind that people who wear N95s professionally, nurses, people who work with hazardous materials, they're fit tested. There's a specific, they put the mask on your face, they put a hood over your head, and they basically put they spray like a thing that is either really sweet or really bitter into this enclosed hood. And then you do all these exercises, like you do deep breathing and you walk around, and they want to make sure that the mask can actually create a really firm seal over your nose and mouth. And so people who haven't been fit tested, N95s are probably better than face covers at keeping them protected, but it's not a guarantee because you haven't been fit tested, you don't know for sure. So that might be a little more too technical, right? I might have gotten too deep into the weeds for us here as a team, but just keep in mind that the requirement is for face covers. N95s can provide a higher level of protection to the wearer. If they have a valve on them though, they don't provide levels of protection to the people around the wearer. That's really what we're looking for. We want something without that valve. And if people want to have an N95, that's okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Another question, just jumping back to what we were talking earlier, are elopements allowed, no celebration? And if so,
Yep.
for how many guests? We addressed that.
Yep.
Outdoors, as long as there's households 6 feet apart, there's no max, and it's indoors 100 people or 25%, whichever is smaller. Someone had a question, and I know this has come up, and I think this is part of, the contradicting information or the perception that people have because restaurants are opened. And I know that we have a couple restaurants or venues that are on here today. And what is the difference? Like, and I think someone posted on here, I think it was Sylvia, what is the difference? And one specific question that was posed yesterday: would Santa Barbara County Public Health Department consider letting couples host a modified wedding reception similar to the restaurant guidelines? A large open space, tables spread apart, servers wearing masks, even if crowded dance floors couldn't happen. If we could set something up following restaurant guidelines, that would be helpful for our industry. At this point, someone can have a ceremony and then go to a restaurant for dinner. It would help local caterers and event professionals to take the restaurant concept to safely celebrate. So that's that question.
So that's great. And I can pass that on to our management team who's considering our options. At this time, no, right? At this time, it's ceremonies only. But I do understand the question. I think one of the things to keep in mind, and one of the things I might have seen some of you on a panel last Thursday as well, is that dining at a restaurant and having a wedding reception, even in a restaurant style environment, are actually, if you think about them, kind of different, right? So if I go to a restaurant with my family and I'm seated at a table 6 feet away from people from other households, I don't know those people, so I'm unlikely to want to walk around and talk with them. I'm probably not going to stay at that restaurant for 3 or 4 or 5 hours visiting, okay? Because at wedding receptions, they tend to be, you're there for a lot longer, right? Because you're visiting. And for some of you are like 4 or 5 hours, that's nothing. Yes, I too have been to an all-night wedding. And then I think I finally bailed at 5 a.m. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go to sleep. No, most of the people stayed till like 8 in the next day. It was insane.
I want to know where you could get invited to.
Yeah. So it was an interesting wedding. The other thing to keep in mind is that, I'm going to a restaurant with people I don't know. I'm going to eat my meal. I'll probably leave within an hour or so, maybe hour and a half if we really linger. If I'm at a wedding, what are the odds I'm going to stay at my table and not visit with the people around me? What are the odds I'm going to be there for an hour or less, right? And so I think they're actually, and the other thing too is when I go to a restaurant, most of the time it's people who are local or from my region. If I go to a wedding, it's people from all over the nation and sometimes the world. So we see a lot of people coming from different places for weddings. They travel and they can bring a lot of mixing that we don't see at the same level locally, right? Could there be people from other parts of the world locally? Absolutely. Is it as likely as it would be at a wedding? No. So I'm going to have a more sustained exposure to people from often a broader way of area, and I'm going to have more intimate contact with more people at a wedding reception than I would at a restaurant. And so I think even though when we think about just sitting and consuming the meal, they could be very similar, the actual event is not at all the same.
Great. And I think when I spoke to Suzanne, again, the same day I spoke to you and you put me in touch with Suzanne, when I asked her, I said, this doesn't make sense specifically because of the restaurants. And I think it was restaurants were opening at the time because it was about a month ago. And that's exactly what she said. She said, it's really the emotion and what everything that comes with events, with weddings.
And how people behave, right? I mean, we behave differently at weddings than we do at restaurants because it's a different experience. It's the whole point of a wedding,
Yes.
So
someone had a great question. This is Julie Steele. If you have a venue and have been recertified to open for indoor dining, so it's a club, this is a private club, do you need to recertify for ceremonies as well? So we're talking about the attestation.
Yeah, and so that's a really great question, and it's happened across a lot of industries. If you have a business where you have multiple types of activities happening and each type has their own guidance from the state, then you need to do an attestation for each type. So we've seen this also with like hotels, right? So hotels have the hotel, but now they can also open their gyms and swimming pools, right? And some hotels have restaurants. And so you would have a certification under the hotel, and then you'd have a certification for the restaurant, dining in, and you have a certification for gyms and fitness centers, which also includes the swimming pools. Same thing, if you have a venue that hosts ceremonies and does food service, we'd want to see an attestation for each. That's my understanding of the expectation.
Great. Someone asked, this is from Acme Hospitality, can you clarify how group dinners at restaurants should operate? Can we have 20 guests dining in our patio if we're following the guidelines in place for restaurant dining?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I don't know if that's Sherry or not. She and I talked.
No.
Okay,
It's,
somebody else.
well,
Hi.
it's on behalf of Sherry, it's Sylvia.
Yeah. Good. Oh, okay. Hi, Sylvia.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, the state guidance for dining in restaurants does not put a maximum number of people that can be part of a single dining party. And so the state guidance doesn't say that you can't have more than 10 people or more than 20 people or more than 50 people at a table. However, there are some guidance, there are some guidelines that you do have to follow. So there's no maximum number of people that can be seated together. However, you have to follow the guidelines for dining party, which means the entire party must be present and seated at the same time. You can't have 10 people come and then another 5 people come and then another 5 people come. They all come together, they're all seated together, they all kind of, the whole idea is that they move as a block, right? And they have to be, while they can sit next to each other at a table, if they show up and they have a single party, they have to be separated by at least 6 feet from anybody from any other dining party. So that 20-person table cannot be, the people at that table can't be within 6 feet of other diners, okay? And you also need to figure out a way to provide 6 feet of social distancing from the servers who are serving that table. And then the last thing is that in that dining guidance, it says that you should minimize the number of servers who have contact with a party. And so the intent is to have a single server for the table, for the entirety of the table's presence at the restaurant, as long as you don't mess up any breaks or state required break periods. So can you have a single server handle a table of 20 people? Is the intent, right? We don't want to have, because you want to try to limit the exposure of your staff. And if you have all your staff members helping all of your tables, then all of your staff are exposed to everybody who comes to your restaurant. Whereas if you have specific servers designated for tables, it reduces the exposure of your workers. They're only exposed to the 50 people they helped that day, not the 250 people that came to the restaurant. And so I think that's one of the things we're really talking about, worker safety as well. How can I make sure my staff can safely serve a group of 20 people? Do I need 2 staff members to do that? And if so, can I pull them off of their other duties at the restaurant so they're just handling this one table? Okay, so those are things to think about. But yeah, they are seated as a single unit. They walk to the table together as a single unit, and everybody in that dining party has to be at least 6 feet away from people from other dining parties and from your service staff. And I realize when you're putting food on the table, you're going to be closer than 6 feet. So of course, service staff needs to wear face covers, and you're going to have to figure out, make sure that the people who are coming to dine understand they have to wear face covers if they're walking to the restroom, and that they're not wandering around and visiting people, that sort of thing.
I thought I read somewhere it was 9 people. Is there something about 9 people?
No, I think the city of Santa Barbara may have sent out some guidance involving events of more than 9 people are not allowed. That's not guidance that we're familiar with. And so if it might be, we're trying to figure out if that's guidance the city has issued separate, but county guidance it has basically just said no events.
And that's kind of what I'm talking about, this conflicting information. I think I actually posted it in one of our private groups that it's 9 events. It did come from City of Santa Barbara. And who do we listen to? Where?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it's going to depend on where you live, right? So if you're so the health officer, so for the county, so that's actually, though, I can clear something up for you here, hopefully. Yay. Okay, yay, we'll see, so maybe some clarity, right? So a lot of people are saying, oh, well, I heard the governor said we could reopen, and so they go ahead and do it. But it turns out that what's happening with the whole California shutdown thing and the governor, basically the state has said certain industries cannot operate, right? The state sort of sets a standard for, we're in stage 2, we're in stage 3. Counties that have said, so the state will say, everybody, the whole state's in stage 2. But if you're a county who's made good progress in controlling COVID, you can get permission to move forward at a slightly more rapid pace. And we had to do, each county that wanted to do that had to complete what's called a county attestation that said, we understand these metrics are important, and these are the things we're doing to meet these metrics, and we're meeting these metrics. And then the state would say, okay, Santa Barbara County, you can go ahead and reopen these sectors ahead of the rest of the state. So we did. We're one of the counties that have attested. But we have to continue to meet our metrics in order to be able to continue to do that. So the state would say, all right, the whole state's here, and everybody in the state can do X, but the counties that have attested and are meeting their metrics are able to move ahead to do these other things. And then the health officer in each county, or the county itself, however they want to do it, has to make the decision, are we going to open that industry section in our county? And if the answer is yes, then they issue a statement like a health officer order or an ordinance that says these industry sectors can reopen, but they don't have to. So the state could say, everybody, you can have wedding receptions tomorrow, and Santa Barbara County say, we're not going to do that yet because we don't think we're ready. Okay. And so when it comes down to, do I listen to what the state says I can do or what the county says I can do? My understanding is we go with what our health officer's order says, that the state says you can do X, but the county has to approve it. And the county can also pull things back before the state pulls them back. So the state could say, well, we're thinking about pulling this back, and the counties could pull it back, or the counties can just do it on their own if they feel like they need to. So when it comes down to state versus county, in general, what the county is allowing is what you're allowed to do, even if the state would be more permissive, okay? When it comes to county versus local, as we know, like Goleta and I think some of the other cities, they had, face cover orders before the counties came out, right, a mandatory one. So those often show up too. So it's actually kind of complex, right? Like each jurisdiction might have this. So the county can be more restrictive than the state, and the cities could be theoretically more restrictive than the county, but nobody can be more permissive than the level above them. So if the state says we can't do something, our county can't say, yeah, we're going to do it. And the cities can't say, oh, we're not going to do that if the county says you have to, right? So I guess the take-home message is that when in doubt, you can email me. And I'll give you my email right now. You just email me directly. But when in doubt, I would tend to go with what the health officer order says, unless there's a local city ordinance that specifically is more restrictive than the health officer's order.
More restrictive.
Yeah. And I'll give you my direct line, all of you.
You sure you want to do that?
I do.
You're amazing.
Yeah, so I totally do. So here's the thing, and people do often hesitate to contact me or contact environmental health. We are the only way that we're going to make it through this is if everybody understands what they need to do. And if you have questions, how else will you find out, right? So I don't want you to hesitate to call me or email me. Email is the best way to reach me right now, but to call me or email me with questions. I want to get you your answers so that you can plan and run your business and help keep our community safe. If I can't give you the answer, I'll try to get you to the person who can. You can ask me like a dozen times and I will you will not make me mad by asking me for help, right?
So I do have to say, I remember first working with you and meeting you like years ago. I was like, oh, what's happening? It was great. So
like I might be really busy and there might be a delay to get back to you, and I apologize for those in advance. But yeah, don't hesitate to contact me. Don't feel guilty. I want that barrier gone because we're here to help, right? And we can't help if we don't know what you need help with. The city can't, there was an email, the city can't override the county. That is my understanding. My understanding is that the cities are not able to override the county in this particular area.
Okay.
But that's sort of a legal question, and I'm not an attorney, so I might not be totally accurate there. If the county says restaurants are closed, it's my understanding a city can't say restaurants are open. Does that make sense? Restaurants are open, by the way, they're not closed. But, for example, that's my understanding.
Someone had a question. For catering based on the regulations you're sharing, is there a regulation that does not allow, for example, some kind of drink/snack for guests to take their food as they wait for the ceremony?
So that's a really great question. I don't know, and I can find out. Yeah, that's a nuanced question. Yeah. We have a lot of those, right? It's like a snack, right? So that you can while you're sitting.
Let's say Cheetos and bottled water, or
or those like Jordan almonds in a little container or something. Yeah. Everybody's like, weddings from the 50s coming back with little butter mints, right? So I will find out where we fall on that.
Someone had a question. We have a client willing to antibody test all guests and vendors in order to have a sit-down dinner. What would that look like?
No.
Great. We have
at this time, there's currently no method for an exception to the fact that receptions are not allowed. So it's not that receptions aren't allowed unless you do these things, it's that receptions aren't allowed.
Great. Yeah. Someone I think just wanted to backtrack. I'm going through the chat here saying that no events outside of the ceremonies are allowed in the whole state of California, or just Santa Barbara right now? It's the whole state. right?
I don't know if it's the whole
Oh,
state or not. I'm talking about our health officer's order.
right.
So I don't know if other counties have more permissive approaches to wedding receptions at this time. I'm not aware. You'd have to check with the county directly. And what I would recommend is checking with the county, not necessarily venues. Not that venues would intentionally misrepresent what's happening in their county, but as you're all aware, it's complex and changing really rapidly, and sometimes really hard to keep track of the newest information. So I would double check.
I did read an article that I shared with our Facebook group about a venue specifically kind of cheating the system, saying they were open and they really weren't. What do we ask for? Like what,
Yeah.
what's my liability if the venue says, yeah, we're open and they're not?
Yeah, I can't answer that question for you. Again, I think that's a legal question, not one I'm able to answer. What I can say is that if you would like to know, if you want to check with the county, you can always give a call to the county. It might take a while to jump around and find the right person, but say, hey, I'm a wedding event planner, I'm an event planner, I'm looking at a location in your county. The venue's telling me that we can have type the XYZ in an event, and I'd like to verify that that's the case before we move forward. I think that would be something that could be a conversation.
So for instance, when you're talking about these attestations, would that be something that a venue would need to have that I could see saying, do you have a
They
certificate?
should. Yeah, so if you've completed the attestation, all of you who have done it will know that you get a little piece of paper that you print out from Santa Barbara County that says I, safely reopened in Santa Barbara County and I have my attestation. I don't know if other counties are using a similar approach. So I don't know, for example, if you would have something like that from somebody in Ventura or San Luis Obispo, for example, but I think you could certainly probably do a little digging on their county website and find out, open, like something like, how do I open for business in Santa Barbara County or in San Luis Obispo County, COVID, anything with COVID, open for business and the county name will probably get you to the right website where you can start making phone calls, sending emails, asking questions.
Great.
Yeah.
Any updates on vaccines? I saw that a couple times come up.
The only update I'm aware of is I think that's the one we're really all hoping for, right? We are looking for a safe, effective vaccine that can be rapidly and widely deployed. I think if you think about it, it takes a while usually to get a safe, reliable vaccine. There's a lot of processes they go through. We don't have one yet. And so until we do, I think it's not going to be clear how effective it is or how accessible it will be, how available it will be. I am guessing, I'm not involved with our vaccination programs, but I'm guessing that vaccines will be deployed to people who are high risk and people like healthcare workers and also people who are like immune compromised if they're able to take vaccines before it makes it to the general population. That would be my guess, right? But I don't know for sure how that's going to work out, and we don't have one yet. It'd be great if we did, and if we could get people to use it. Yeah.
Great. We have about 10 minutes left, so I just want to be mindful of that. Again, someone asked, since gatherings over 10 people, could we host a ceremony and cater dinner for 10?
No.
Okay.
You can have a ceremony for 10, but there's no catered dinner allowed at this time in Santa Barbara County.
Okay, you put your contact information, so if you guys haven't seen that, will we have time to voice questions at the end? Also, Barbara, put your question in now. I want to make sure we stick to our 1 hour. That's what I promised everyone.
Yeah.
Someone said, and Emily, she said, Kendra, you're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lots of thank yous for you. I think this is very helpful.
Thank you. The questions, I'm seeing questions about resort buyouts and things like that. Yeah, so those are good questions. And I think what I can say right now is that celebrations are specifically prohibited in the health officer's order. So that includes things like birthday parties and retirement parties and baby showers. Like those are, and it doesn't say only those that are held in public spaces. It says that celebrations are specifically prohibited. And if you want to get married right now, a ceremony is the limit under the health officer's order. Now, if you're buying out a resort and you have your ceremony and the resort also serves your guests breakfast, lunch, and dinner because they're staying there for a weekend and you're using the regular restaurants, I think that's probably one of those things where, yeah, if I'm staying at a hotel that has a restaurant on site and I'm there for a friend's wedding and I go to the ceremony and then I go back to the hotel and I have breakfast, I have lunch, I have dinner, that's normal, right? That's how the hotel would normally be operating. But if I'm having a group breakfast, a group lunch, and a group dinner that's a celebration of the couple, then I think we're kind of over the line of what is actually supposed to be allowed right now.
And I think one of the things too is at a restaurant, you have people trickling in. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest differences from what you and I talked about versus even if it's just 20 people all coming at the same time, 50 people at the same time.
Right. Well, and also I think it's the whole sense of like, are we having toasts in the whole restaurant? Like, I mean, those sorts of things. So what we're going for is ceremony, yes. Activities of daily living, fine. Celebrations, including reception type events, are not currently allowed.
Yep. And I think Christina had the same question. A small boutique inn offers a buyout, all 8 rooms, up to 20 people, no guests from the outside, typically family members. Do they still need to follow the ceremony and reception guidelines?
Yes, they do. To the best of my knowledge, yes, they do. The ceremony and reception guidelines apply to events held in public spaces as well as events held in private spaces.
This is a great question from Emily. July 26th, how long is the current order valid? Is it July 26th?
Yes, it's effective. Actually, I'm pulling it right now. I think it is July 26th. Yeah. Let me see here. Hold on. I'm pulling it really quick. I had it up just in case a question like this showed up. And wow, why can I not see it? I actually changed the date on it. I should know this. I'm sometimes part of the team that helps do these. Here we go. Yep, 5 p.m. July 26th, or until it's extended, rescinded, superseded, or amended in writing by the County of Santa Barbara Health Officer.
And what is that specifically?
It's the 2020-12.2 order. It's for the control of COVID-19 phased reopening, and it deals with it includes the language about ceremonies, wedding ceremonies and celebrations. So it specifically says that parties and receptions is in attachment A, things that have to remain closed at this time, except that wedding ceremonies are permitted so long as the June 12th, 2020 CDPH guidance for places of worship and providers of religious services is followed, including indoor venues are limited to 25% of capacity or 100 people, whichever is fewer, or outdoor venues are limited by the natural limits that permit social distancing of 6 feet between people from different households. Receptions for weddings are not allowed. And parties and receptions are not allowed under that order.
Great.
Regardless of whether or not they're associated with the wedding. They're just, birthday parties and, 4th of July barbecues and stuff are not allowed at this time.
Great. So that's up until July 26th for now, and then
correct. And then it'll probably be adapted to however where we are at that point, and it might change before that if something requires it to be changed before that. It's a living document, and it is changed and updated on a regular basis.
Great. Barbara, I know, was on here, and she had a question. Bride is asking for a wedding, 50 people, private estate in Goleta. I said yes. Guess I should tell them no reception or dancing.
Right.
It's all family. Doesn't
matter if it's all family or not. It's still a group. Now they can have the ceremony, absolutely no problem. But it being a family-only event my understanding is that it doesn't matter if it's family or family and friends.
Yep.
All the same rules.
And I think really the question is, because then there was a follow-up question to that. What should we be telling our clients for the fall? I mean, for me, we have to follow these guidelines. We don't have the crystal ball.
Nobody does. Yeah. If anybody knows what's going to happen in the fall, you have my number. I would love to know. We got stuff to plan, right? Give me a call. So what I would say is, I think this is the message that I would share if it was me. I'm like trying to think. I would say they've chosen a really, really unique time in 100 years of history to get married, right? And they didn't necessarily choose it, like it just happened, right? And so part of that is that we can't really plan. We don't really know what's going to be happening in the fall, which of course is sort of a metaphor for life, as it turns out. You think you know what's going to happen, and then it doesn't happen that way, and that's kind of kind of the way a wedding works and kind of the way life works. But when you have people who are trying to make these big decisions about what do we do, I think what I would say is build in as much flexibility as you can. Scale down your expectations so that you're not disappointed when things don't go exactly the way you thought, because the odds are good they won't. You might get a happy surprise, but be prepared. I'd say be prepared for a very curtailed event And we're going to hope that things have loosened up and they can have more than they thought they were going to get. But I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really going to be it, is how much flexibility can you build in is what I would say is probably in your best interests right now.
And I think too, from the time you and I spoke to get today together, obviously things have not been going well. You know, our numbers in general in the US, we're banned from most of the world. We're banned from other states.
We had 98 new
It's been a
cases in
one
Santa Barbara
week that
County
goes up to
yesterday.
another. What's that?
We had 98 new cases in the county yesterday.
Yeah. So
Right. It's a lot.
Brutal to cross over. Let's talk about July 4th. Someone asked what celebrations, receptions are prohibited. What are your thoughts on city beaches? Will they be open July 4th while Ventura and LA are closed?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I think we're going to find out more after the governor is supposed to talk this afternoon. So I think we're probably going to get some more ideas about what the weekend's going to look like after that conversation, after the governor does that, which totally sounds like I'm punting, but the truth is I have no idea, right? Yeah, like the governor has indicated that he will be releasing additional information about restrictions or what's happening over the weekend at a press conference today. And so we're kind of waiting to see what that specifically says before I think decisions are made.
Perfect. And last few questions I'll take. Is there a website where we can register that will automatically notify us of any changes to the COVID policies?
Oh, wow. That's a great idea. No, it's not, there isn't. So, yeah, actually there's a place you can look. So the public health department has a social media presence. We have a public information officer and we have a Facebook and Twitter feed. And so what I would recommend is, hold on here. I'm actually going to I'm going to give you a link to our public health department's main webpage where all of our stuff, all of our COVID related information is located. Trying to get it loaded up here. And I know we're almost to time and I appreciate your patience while I get this.
No, we appreciate you.
Yeah, and it's the public information portal, and it has a bunch of information and like the latest COVID news and our press releases are all on there. So that's actually what I would recommend you do. It's not necessarily that you can sign up and get updates automatically, but if you check back there, I just put it there. It's publichealthsbc.org. If you want to check back there on a daily basis, and especially if you scroll to the bottom, it has all the press releases. And so if there's a new health officer's order, that'll be in a press release. And if you want to follow the Facebook page or the Twitter feed, those things are also pushed out on social media. So that can be a place that you can just sort of get information that something's changed, and then you can go look and see what the changes are on the website. But the website is there as well for those of you who just want to go straight to the website every morning or whatever.
Perfect. And then a similar question. Beyond local, do you have contacts for San Luis Obispo County, Ventura County, and LA by chance? Handy available? Who do we talk to?
Yeah, I don't at the time. Let me think. No, I don't at the time right now. I would say that they probably have public information portals similar to the ones that we have, but I'm not directly linked to their COVID teams. So that's something I can look into and see. BTA and SLO contacts. And then Zoe, if I find those, I can just email them to you directly. And if you'd be willing to share with the group.
Yeah, I definitely will. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because of course we're working in a tri-county environment. I know a lot of you are helping with events in multiple areas. So I'll look and see if I can find it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Last minute, do you have any last words of wisdom, Miss Wise?
Yeah. I think, let's see. This is really exhausting for everybody, right? This is hard and it's kind of scary, and we're all trying to live our lives and run a business and handhold a lot of people. I think everybody is holding everybody's hands right now, right? And I would just say, keep on keeping on. That's what we're going to be doing for a while. And I think especially with event planners, I know your job is emotional management, right? You're helping people manage their emotions during these really important life transformative events. And so I think when I'm thinking about like every day when I go to work and what other people do, I think we wear our face covers, we take care of the people around us, and we be as kind as we can be and just as patient. I things are changing. None of us have very much control over it. That can be incredibly stressful. Your business is affected. I would just say that we know that's really hard. We know everybody is really struggling with the changes and with the uncertainty. I want to be here to help as much as I can. I may not be able to fix it, but I hope I can help explain it, give you options. So I'd say don't hesitate to call or email me if you have those questions. We're here to help. And also just be, I just say, urge patience. It's going to take us a while. We are going to make it through this. It will not be like this forever.
Yeah.
But it's going to be
good.
like this
Okay,
for a
that is
while.
one good answer we got.
Okay, we're good.
Well,
Yeah.
I value your time. I know how busy you are. Thank
That's
you.
okay. Yeah.
I'd love to invite you back in a month. We'll see how
Sure.
things are going. And
Yeah.
thank you guys for being on here. I'll follow up with those links once I get them from you, and I'll put everything out to everyone. So
okay. Thank you all very much for having me and for being such lovely, lovely people and asking such great questions. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're
Ciao, ciao.
welcome. Okay, take care.
Bye. Thanks, Kendra.
Bye.